Welcome back to the Dazed and Confused in the Dating Pool and Why It Doesn't Have to Be That Way podcast. I am your co host, Rachel, joined by my co host, Mickler. And tonight we have a super special guest, our first international guest, who I am just so honored and so excited to jump into this conversation with. And I will give our little pitch that we do, not pitch, caveat, I guess I should say, at the beginning of every episode, and then I'll tee it off to you, Mickler, to introduce him. So, again, as we say at the beginning of every episode, Mickler and I are not dating experts. We're not coaches. We don't pretend to be. We are simply two Christian friends having honest, raw, real conversations about our individual journeys of dating and how we are learning to honor God and others in the process. So, with that, Mickler, I will kick it off to you to introduce this week's very special guest.
Yes. So, all right. I think a lot of the time, us believers, when we're in conversation, something that comes out of our mouth is like, oh, I'm just waiting on God. So, today's topic, we're going to kind of unpack this. Is this a misconception? Is this something that, as single Christians, we should be doing? Like, what's this whole deal? So, as Rachel mentioned, we do have a very special guest. This man has been an awesome, pivotal part of my life. He's been a coach. He's been a mentor, a dear brother of mine. I would even say he kind of steps in as a father role to me. So I really, really appreciate him. And he's just a man of God, helping people step into their purpose. He's a happily married fella as well, has 3 beautiful kids. And it was so funny because I just posted on my Instagram story this reel, and it was a guy who was at a stoplight, and he was saying, "Hey, God, can I get married?" He pushes the button, and it says, "Wait." And he said, "Hey, God, where's my wife?" And it says, "Wait." And he sent me a DM, and this pretty much stirred on the conversation that we're gonna have today. So, want to definitely welcome Mr. Joseph Wilson to the party.
Hello. Thank you for having me. It's
Yes,
going to be
sir.
fun.
Yep. All right, man. So do you want to just start with kind of what you had mentioned in there in the DM, where it was like this concept of instead of just waiting on God, we should be doing this?
Yeah, I mean, so firstly, like, I love that you guys preface with the fact that you're not coaches, you're not claiming to be, your friends having a conversation. And when it comes to this subject and today's conversation, I would like to lump myself in there too. Like, I'm not some great expert who has all the answers. I'm just adding to the conversation and asking good questions. I think as believers, it's important for us all to ask good questions that we can all then try and answer together. So, yeah, I love what you're doing. I think it's very important. And I think the more real and raw these conversations get, the better it's going to be for the body. So congrats and thank you for having me on. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, most
And
definitely. Bro,
mm,
but you always said you wanted to be the Kingdom Hitch.
I joked about it a lot because I saw so much dysfunction when it comes to relationships.
Yeah.
Like we overcomplicate things, we make things such a big deal, and I've been through that too. And in church culture, it's quite rampant. So I used to joke about being a kingdom hitch. It would be fun. Yeah,
That's
I
amazing.
guess
That's the first I've ever heard you say that. That's incredible.
I guess I'm hitching people to their purpose now, which is good.
Ooh, I like
Yeah.
it. I like
Mm.
it.
Yeah. That's so
Yeah. So, I mean, our conversation in terms of the waiting part, like, I think a lot of people are stuck in that mentality of I'm just waiting. Like, God's going to pop this person out of somewhere and they are going to be the perfect person for me. And I think that that's caused a lot of people to then become really confused. Like, why isn't my person here? When are they going to be here? What must I do to make them be here? Make them be here sooner? Have I missed them? Have I made a mistake? The conversation gets a little crazy. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I just want to piggyback on what you said because I was just having a conversation with a friend last night and some things were coming up that I heard in her heart. And I was like, you don't have to perform for this, right? Like,
Hmm.
we don't have to perform for anything with God. And I think sometimes when it comes to singleness and waiting in the body of Christ, there's this mindset that if I do this, that, if I check these boxes, and if I'm doing this, and if I'm praying this, and if I'm doing like, then God will bring my spouse, and yeah, and so it's just this like, I think that we have to be careful in this time of waiting, which I love what you said to Mickler. So if you don't remember it, then I'll say it. But because when he said
Yeah.
that to me, I was like, dang, that's so good. Everything you say is always like fire, Joseph. So it just is. But yeah, but when it comes to this idea of waiting, just that what you were bringing up of like, okay, well, what do I have to do for this person to be here? I think that's something that so many single Christians can knowingly and unknowingly find ourselves stuck in. And then that feeling of like, oh, well, God's holding out on me. Oh, well, I must not just be doing this right. All of that. So, yeah, I just wanted to jump off of that point that you brought up, because I think that that's a really, really important part for us to talk about.
Yeah. See, one of the things I think happens when someone's waiting for this person is they start to bank on this person bringing them fulfillment. Like, when I get married, I'll be fulfilled. When I find them, I'll be fulfilled. They think that I'll be so fulfilled with this person that now I just need them to show up. But in
Mm,
reality, like, neither of us were born to be married, right? No one's purpose is to be married. Marriage is a blessing, right? When God made
mm,
Adam, it wasn't Adam, you are created so that you will be married to Eve, right? That's
Mm.
mm,
not the purpose, right? So you start to get messed up when you make marriage something it wasn't supposed to be. Like Miles Monroe says, abuse is inevitable, abnormal use is inevitable. So now
man.
you got people that think that their spouse or their partner, it's their job to make them feel happy, make them feel fulfilled, make them feel better about life. But that's not their role, you know? So this waiting can mess up people's perceptions on, man, when I get married, I'll be fulfilled. And so I've watched people wait, then get married and not be fulfilled because it's just another relationship, a closer one, yes. And there's a lot of good things about marriage. But what they thought they were going to get from this marriage, they didn't get because they weren't designed to get it from the marriage. And so then they
Mm,
end up being disappointed or resentful, things like that, you know? So I like to say that your purpose, like why you are here on the planet, is the most important element of your existence. Nothing will ever
mm,
fulfill you more than that. Right? My
mm,
wife doesn't fulfill me beyond what God allows her to. As someone who walks life with me, she's a blessing to me, but she's not the reason I exist. If
yeah.
I start to make her the reason I exist, I will ruin our relationship, you know?
It's so
So,
good.
yeah.
Yeah, no, go talk about that more, and this idea of purpose. Because again, I think this is something that we get so fixated on, like you said, and so I'll just be transparent and say that there was a time in my life when I thought, like, okay, when my husband comes along, like, then I'll really be like living my purpose, and this is what I'll be doing, and I'll be home raising babies, and, all that stuff. And so I think, especially as a kingdom woman, and, a lot of what we are taught, I'll just put that out there, there was this idea that, okay, so when my husband comes, then I would be fulfilled. And what I see now so much, and I get really passionate about because I lived it for a while myself, was this idea. And I see so many women in particular, I can speak as a woman, I obviously can't speak as a man, but living their life in a holding pattern, waiting for exactly what you're talking about. Waiting so that when my husband comes, then I'll be fulfilled. Then I'll be walking in my purpose. Then I'll be, it's like, no, no, no. Who has God made you to be right now? What is in your hand right now? What's in front of you? Live your life. You are
Mm.
not stuck in a holding pattern. The person that God has for you is going to run with you in the adventures that God has for you together, in the purposes that God has for each of you. And you're going to champion each other on in that. But if you're waiting in this holding pattern for this husband to come along, for this spouse to come along, and now my life will finally make sense. Now my life will finally get off the ground. I get so sad when I have these conversations with people, and I've had some recently with some younger believers. And
Mm.
it just makes me want to say, no, 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 honey, no. Like, there is so much that God has for you. You're not stuck unless you choose to be. What would you
Yeah.
say?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I like to say find your purpose before your person. you know, your
Mhm.
mission before your man, your work before your woman, right? It's like God makes man, puts him in the garden, and then he gives him work, right? Work not like a job we know today, but work like his purpose, the reason he's here and what he's anointed to do, appointed to do, you know. And then comes this woman because it was not good for him to be alone, and the beauty of companionship, of partnership, of having someone who does life with you as an equal, and you give each other energy, you sustain one another, you help one another, you carry one another, but you don't make the other person the be all and the end all, you know? So I totally agree with you. I love everything you said. And I think that's an important part of this conversation.
Yeah, and I think for me, as like, I had a mentor too who was always encouraging me, like, hey, in regards to like priority, it's like master, mission, mate. And
Mm.
as like, he had a bunch of guys under him, and guys, we have these conversations like, hey, oh, look at that girl, blah blah blah, and all that stuff. So I was like, you know what? What if I should find my wife, in a sense, like, have her around? So I kind of wanted to like change the arrangement of like, no, if God is gonna bless me with a mate, then why not? But this was years ago. I was much younger, and now I'm seeing the reason as to like why it's so important for a man to be so clear about the mission that he has from the Lord. And yeah, it's just so necessary, because I think you, Joseph, were the one who was like, yo, like, if you meet your wife before you step into your destiny, then she's gonna alter it. And it's like,
Mm.
oh man. So,
Well, I may have said something like that a bit differently, but
yeah, 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 yeah.
she has the chance to alter it, right? Like when
Mm,
somebody gets obsessed about this relationship and then it finally comes, the rest of their life kind of shuts off. And I've seen this happen so many times, even with friends of mine. They suddenly get a girlfriend and then they're gone, you know? And all the things they were doing is like, no, well, I don't do that anymore. I don't do that anymore. I don't have time for that anymore. I don't have time for you anymore. And it's like for 4 years they go in this hibernation, and they squeeze the life out of the relationship, really, you know.
Mm.
So I think this is a good thing. One thing I just want to say about what you're saying in terms of like master, mission, mate, you know, like church thinking, Christianity thinking has trained us a lot to do this top down thing, which I
mm,
don't think is an accurate way of depicting the kingdom. So I
mm,
like to use a bridge approach where it's like on your journey, you mature on this journey. And so the bridge is more like this rather than like this, because this conversation has then caused people to go, well, women, you're like not important, you know, because you're
Mm.
third on my list and stuff like that. But actually, if we look at it like a bridge and we're all maturing on this bridge, then now I am mature enough to a point where I can walk into a new season. And I'm maturing as I go along instead of you're not as important to me. Does that make sense? Because on the bridge, everything is just as important, you know?
I love that. As a woman, I love that. I'm like, thank you for that.
Yeah, it's interesting when God, like in Genesis, where he uses the word helper, where the word says, the Bible says helper, that word translates to Ezer Kenegdo. I think I said it right. Ezer
Mhm.
Kenegdo, and that word means sustainer beside him. You know, like that's a woman has this power to sustain a man in a way that nothing else can. And
mm,
that same word is used 15 or 16 times to speak about God in the Bible, that same word for helper. Now, we've turned the word helper into handbag and all this kind of weird stuff, but in reality, helper is the sustainer beside him. And so there is a beautiful analogy there of the union of a man and a woman, a husband and a wife, you know? And that's why I don't like the top down stuff, because it starts to mess up priorities in a way I don't think was God's heart, you know?
mm.
Agreed.
Okay. Yeah. So then, what would it look like if on the bridge? Like, how would that kind of change the perspective?
So I may be wrong here. For some people, may not like what I'm about to say, but to me, right, I this bridge, right, there's a pre-believer and you're a mature son, just like Jesus, right? Romans 8:29. You were predestined to be conformed to the image and the likeness of His Son. So we're all on this bridge somewhere. There's a pre-believer, and then you're saved, and you're just walking out this journey of maturity. And my thinking is, as you mature with your father, things open up for you. Like a good father, there's good gifts based on your maturity, what you can handle, what you can enjoy. God opens things up for you, you know, and marriage is a part of that. So one of the reasons we freak out is because we don't believe God's a good father and he has someone for us. So we use language of I will wait because I know you're good, but our heart and our lifestyle is screaming, where are you? You are late. Look at me. I'm older now. You're obviously missing it. What's the problem? All this confusion.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, again, I was just having a conversation with a different friend about that, and she actually is engaged in the process of being married, and she was just talking about how, like, just how much God's done with her heart posture and how much she didn't even realize she was living life saying she was believing one thing, but actually believing something else.
Mm.
And I think that a lot of us, I can speak as one who's in my 40s, especially who are older and still, haven't met our spouse yet, haven't been married yet. There is this like, okay, I believe that you're good. And I believe that this is something that you have for me. I believe this is a desire of the Father that you've put in my heart that you want to fulfill.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, I don't see it yet.
Mm-hmm.
So there is this wrestle. There is this little bit of cognitive dissonance that I think some of us deal with that we might not always recognize is there and say like, yes, Lord, I believe you. But there's a difference between, and I know we're going to get to this in a minute, so I don't want to steal your thunder, but I forget who it was that said
No
it.
thunder here.
Okay. I forget who it was who said this, but faith prepares, right? Faith prepares. So when I truly believe that you are a good father and that you have this for me, I am going to prepare my life to, first of all, again, I know we're probably going to talk about this more, but to live out the purpose that you have for me here on earth, and also to live that out with the spouse that you have for me. And so that's just something that's been coming up for me. And so I'm just going to steal your thunder. So when when Mickler sent me like exactly what you said. So, okay, so just to recap. So Mickler had this reel that he posted of this guy who's like, like you're waiting at a crosswalk and he's like, God, can I get married? And he hits the button and says, wait, God, where's my wife? Wait. And what he said to me, Joseph, is you replied and said, don't wait, train. I would love for you to talk about that because, anyway, there's more I could say, but I will shut up and let you take it from here.
Please feel free to release all your thunder. Yeah, I mean, the reason I wrote that was because there is this other meme that's going around too of how Abraham waited for 25 years, Jesus waited for 30 years, David waited for 15 years. So we make it look like there's this waiting time where nothing's really happening. You just meander through life, and then suddenly God does something. But in reality, all those guys, they weren't waiting. They were engaging, enjoying, expressing, evolving the whole time. They were exploring who God is, and they were maturing. And that's what I would call training. The training is you're just maturing, right? This is the whole goal, is that you mature and you become more and more like Jesus. And so even marriage is just a part of that journey. I think that we've skewed it by making marriage something I don't think it was supposed to be. It's a part of the journey, not the beginning and the end of the journey. And so, yeah, I think the training is important. It's a big deal. And God is the one who does the training, So, for example, right, when this whole thing began for me, the Lord asked me, what if you never get married, Joseph? And that question, like, it kind of sucker punched me because I'd never thought about it like that before. What do you mean, what if I don't get married? Well, what if you don't get married? Am I still good? And I needed time to process that. I know Christianity has taught us to say something and believe something else, but I got radically saved, so I didn't have room for that, right? I was very raw and real with God. Like, I don't believe you're that good, or I don't really think you show up like that, do you? Like, it was a real conversation. So that time when he's like, what if you never get married? Am I still good, Joseph? Like that really, it took me a season to actually allow myself to walk through that, and I don't know if this is a conversation people even want to have today, right? And that would be the first step, right? I think about Daniel and his three mates, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, and they're going to die, and their response is, God's going to save us. But even if he doesn't, it doesn't change what's happening here and who he is and who we are to him and who he is to us. And I think that's the beginning of the journey. Is if it happens or it doesn't happen, it doesn't change this. It doesn't change the union. And most people don't cross that first line, you know?
It's so good. Go ahead, Mickler. You're chomping at the bit. Jump in.
No, no. So I think like with the cognitive dissonance thing, we're like saying like, hey, like I feel like I'm in a waiting season right now of like waiting on my spouse. But then on a day-to-day basis, it's like we're still on the dating apps. We're still like kind of trying to do these things. Is that what it means of like we're we believe in God, but then it's like our actions are kind of proving otherwise in a
Well,
sense?
I'm going to push back on that because I don't think there's anything wrong in, waiting on God. Like, I know this has been said so many times, like, that word is active. I also don't believe that we're just supposed to sit around at home and wait for the FedEx guy who happens to be hot and single to show up, right? Like, there is a part that we have to play, whether it's fulfilling God's call in our life or a promise that he's given us. Like, we do still have responsibility in the process. So I'm going to push back on that. I don't think that's the cognitive dissonance. I think the cognitive dissonance is what you're talking about, Joseph. Like, first of all, do I really believe that you're good? And do I really believe that you have good things for me? Is my expectation partnered with your goodness in every area of my life, including this one? And so, to me, when I hear you talk about training, man, it's so cool too, because I just love how God dovetails things. And that's something that he's been talking to me a lot about. I know all three of us are super into fitness, um, and training like is a huge part of fitness. You don't just wake up and now all of a sudden I'm strong. I can do this, right? Training has to do with consistency, day in and day out, and building up muscles and pushing yourself and challenging yourself, and training movement and then training the muscle and all this stuff. So to me, training is what you're talking about, Joseph, in terms of like, who are you? What's your identity? Who did God make you to be? What does he put on this earth to do? What's in your hand right now? And that diligence and that consistency, day after day after day after day after day. Because the reality, I think, too, is that sometimes we get so fixated on this, we forget, like, okay, Lord, you put me here on purpose for a purpose. So who is it that you want to bless through me today? Who is it that you have a word of encouragement for through me today? Like, let my eyes be open, not just so fixated on, like, God, where's my spouse? But, Jesus did what he saw his father doing, said what he heard his father saying, and went where his father told him to go. And so, am I still showing up that way? Am I still doing that in my life? Or is my conversation with you only about this, right? If it is, then that's totally out of whack, because, like you were saying, Joseph, like, it's not the be all and end all. It's part of the process. It's part of the journey. And it is a blessing. And it is part of, I believe that we can fulfill our purposes together and champion each other on in that. And that's something that I'm excited about in marriage. And also, what am I doing today? What am I doing today in my relationship with you, Lord? What am I doing today with what you've put in my hand? How am I training in this moment? Because again, it's not like, and I think that even comes to like learning how to handle conflicts in relationships and learning other things, things like we talk about on this podcast, learning about God, learning about each other, learning about emotional intelligence, right? These are all like training things so that the movement is being trained and the muscle is being built up so that when marriage is that part of the bridge for us, right? When we do walk into that, it's not just like overnight, like, okay, well, I was waiting around doing nothing and like, boom, I'm married and now everything's fine. Like, no, because you still have a purpose to fulfill. You still have a unique identity in God. And what are you doing with those things? There's still responsibilities that he's put in your hand to steward. There's still people that he's surrounded you with to love and to minister to and to impact. There's still impact that you're here to have in the earth. So what are you doing with that right now? Not only then, but what are you doing with that right now? Because again, what you're doing with that right now will be amplified in marriage when you and your spouse are doing it together. What would you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot there, and that was good. And I would agree. I would agree. In terms of the looking at the apps and stuff, like you just said, Mickler, like I think this is where, we are always taught about the doing, like what you're doing and what you're not doing. And we really talk about where you're doing something from, why you're doing something. So two people could be on an app and one's totally freely exploring and engaging in total freedom. And the other one is in desperation, seeking out something that they believe is going to save them and change their life. So if we make it about don't go on an app or go on an app, we're missing the point because the two hearts are so different. And so it always comes back to this question of why are you doing what you're doing, right? Why are you on the app? And everyone can answer that personally for themselves, right? And this is why I think this is such a hard conversation because it's so personal, it's so individual. Like here's one thing, right? A lot of people I've met who are in their late 30s or early 40s and are not married, they are like, well, I'm not married because I can't get married, or like they're waiting for someone, but they don't take the power that they have in the decision they're making. They almost make it a powerless experience. Like, for example, like, oh, I'm nearly 40, I'm not married, like there's a problem. But then when I say to them, well, you could have been married right now. You could get married tomorrow. We can find you a guy. We can find you a girl. It's not hard. We can find you, but you have a standard. And you don't seem to find that standard. So you are choosing not to be married. Why don't you enjoy the powerful choice you're making instead of making a choice, but then feeling powerless and now be stuck in between this place? So for some people, it's like, man, like if marriage is like, you really got to get married and there is someone there, you make your decision. I mean, I have to be careful how I say this, right? Like, because whether I get married today or get married 2 years from now, like you were saying, the journey continues. Life continues. I am going to grow. They are going to grow. Life's going to happen. So I feel like a lot of Christians have made this weird mystical subject that's like this unicorn, and nobody knows what this unicorn looks like and how it comes, and they pretend to be happy for other people when they find the unicorn, but the unicorn eludes them, and I don't think it needs to be that complicated.
It's so true. I love that picture. It's so true. That's how so many people approach it and talk about it. And I think that's where the dissonance comes in, right? Because, like, okay, God, I believe that you're a good father and I believe that you have this for me, but we're living life like it's a unicorn. And like inside, we actually believe that it's a unicorn. And everybody else somehow in the forest has found this unicorn, but for whatever reason, we haven't found it yet. So I love that picture.
So I think it's important to talk about this next part too, like of if we have these electromagnetic fields and we have, vibration frequency, I don't know if you guys go into that kind of stuff, but on a quantum level, there is something there. You can call it anything you want, like attraction, the spirit you carry, whatever it is. There is an attraction and a repelling that happens in humans, right? And so freedom is the most attractive element of a human. When you are walking in true freedom, you are attractive. And when I say attraction, I don't just mean like sexually, right? But attraction, and people want to be around you. They want to talk with you. They want to spend time with you. They're drawn to you for some reason, attraction. And so that freedom, when you are someone that's constantly feeling like, well, I'm not married, so something's wrong with me or something is wrong, you're not in that freedom. And you end up repelling potential situations without even realizing. That's something that I have seen a lot. Maybe we talk a little bit about that. What do you think?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah,
well,
no,
I was
that's so
kind of
good.
passing you the ball there.
Throw it back. No, I just love because you're just saying like, what is the heart behind it? What are my intentions? What are my motives in this time in this season? Like, why am I putting myself out there? And that takes place when you're, processing with the Lord and talking to Him, right? So that's what it's like encouraged in this time when you're single, like have this conversation with the Lord, right?
Yeah.
And I love how you were just bringing that up, Joseph, about like the freedom that you carry will be felt. It will be felt. It will be experienced by others, whether it's in a dating situation or any other relationship. And like you were saying, like freedom is magnetic. So yeah, jump in and talk to that. I'd love for you to talk to that more.
I've unfortunately or fortunately ended up in too many marriage counseling sessions, right? More than I'd ever wanted in the last 8 years. And I've seen so many situations where there are single people who think their life's not good because they're not married, and they're these married people who are walking through hell now, some together and some not together, even though they live in the same house. And when you trace back to how did you get in this position, it is always coming back to, well, I thought that if this happened, it would solve everything. I thought that if this happened, I'd be really happy, and so instead of letting this be a part of a full life, somehow this became the focus to create a full life. Like before I got married, I didn't even actually want to get married, right? And this, hopefully you don't take it the wrong way, but this is something that the Lord started speaking to me about. And I feel like it was to do with my calling, why I'm on the planet, right? And so marriage was a part of that journey at that time. So I said to him, I'm really scared. I'm scared to get married because I don't know how to keep a relationship. I don't know how to communicate transparently, vulnerably, be real in a relationship. I don't know anything other than being physical and doing some things together. I don't know how to be in a relationship. And that was where I really felt Jesus be like, everything I am to you, I want you to be to your wife. And so it began this journey of training, of understanding. By receiving from God, I was able to then give to my wife. And so marriage became much more than just, oh, well, I found a woman and we kind of do life together, Am I making sense, or am I bunny trailing?
Yeah, no, this is good. Keep going. Keep going. Take him full
Yeah,
screen again. That was good. I was like, keep going.
no, well, so I'm saying this because, and people might not believe me, right? People don't believe married people usually when they talk about being single. But if I wasn't married right now with 3 children, I would not have a lesser life. I would not be stuck somewhere in a basement hoping one day things would change and not be happy about my life, right? My happiness did not come from my marriage. My marriage gets my happiness, right? I give my marriage happiness. I don't get happiness from it. I get my happiness from the Lord, right? 2008, June 7th, I party all night. I go to church drunk on June 8th. I have a supernatural encounter. And then I went on this 3-week journey of God just wanting to love me and me repelling his love because I didn't feel I was good enough, So when I started to receive his love, suddenly like my life became so good, so fulfilled that nothing could give that to me. Right. I used to drink vodka. I liked vodka. I liked 42 Below. I don't know if we're allowed to talk about this on your podcast. I
Yeah,
hope
go
we
for
are.
it.
You know,
Just
42
kidding.
Below is a brand over here that's really nice. It had this flavor, Feijoa flavor. I don't know if you've ever heard of these fruit called Feijoas. No?
Oh,
Amazing vodka. And I drank because drinking made me feel free. Drinking made me feel like, oh, I can just be me now. I don't have to pretend when I drink. And if something doesn't look good, I can blame it on the vodka. So I come to God, I get so free that vodka would have been a downgrade for me. Right. And this is the part I don't think we understand. Like, if I make marriage my fulfillment, it's a downgrade for me. It's a downgrade for you. It's a downgrade for us. And so when we're not living in that fullness, you can't even attract half the things you're going to attract. So that's something I want to put out there, is that currently in every listener's life, whoever's listening, God has something for you today. And it's just as fulfilling as when you get married. It's not that these are lesser things, and I want to give you an example here of David, right? David, he's just busy doing his life. He's enjoying God, looking after some sheep. Most people would have thought he's a failure. And while he's looking after his sheep, he's representing the Father. He's representing Jesus. A bear comes to kill the sheep, and instead of running away, he steps in the gap. Just like our Father steps in the gap, just like Jesus steps in the gap, David steps in the gap. And he's maturing in this journey of killing a bear, and then he kills a lion, and he's protecting the sheep. To then he gets offered a cheese sandwich delivery job by his dad, right? Go and deliver some cheese sandwiches to your brother. They're the real warriors. You're a loser. And in that moment, you or me might have told our dad to shove it and be like, I just killed a bear with my bare hands. I killed a lion with my bare hands, and you want me to deliver sandwiches? But David is just maturing and becoming more and more like Jesus, where Jesus came to serve, not to be served. David's like, I'm just going to serve. And he goes to serve these sandwiches. And we all know he has a date with destiny. He meets Goliath. But the thing that people forget actually is after he killed Goliath, everything that everyone chases in life just came to him. He got property, he got a wife, he got a promotion. Everything that people spend their whole life chasing were just part of David's path. And they're part of your path. They're part of my path. As I pursued who God is in me, who I am in him, and walk that journey, everything else is just part of that path. But what I think happens is people deviate and start pursuing the things, right? They leave their path and pursue the things, and that's where it can get very confusing because we have a good God, and then now you're off this on this other tangent, and you don't know how to reconcile that, right? Did that make sense?
Totally. That's the whole seek first the kingdom, and all these things will be added.
I was just about
There
to
you go.
say that.
Yeah. Yeah. So some people get married, then they're still unhappy, and now they have to figure it out being married, you know?
Yeah.
And it's really hard doing that married, or doing that now married with a blended family, or doing that married with children is much harder than when you have the freedom, you know?
That's
Like
good.
the freedom of being alone, I mean, not, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? But when
Yeah.
when you get married, it's really interesting how much you start to it's fun, you enjoy it, but you also keep like you get matured and developed even more, you know? Like you think you're patient, then you get married, you realize you're not so patient, you know? Or you think you're loving, and then you get married, and you're like, well, I'm not that loving. Like it's easy to love people that don't live with me all the time, right? And
Yeah.
you start learning things about yourself, you know, and then you have children and the same thing happens. Like when I had my first kid, I was like, man, I am not patient. Then I was like, oh, I've got this patience thing down now. But my second kid, I'm like, oh, wait, there's more. Oh, wait, there's more, you know? And so I just think that if you're able to tell the truth to yourself, like, man, where am I really? Like, do I really think God is that good? Does he have someone for me? Do I feel like someone that he has for me is going to really fulfill me more than him, more than anything else? And to talk to God about that, I think is a very important part of this conversation.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Yeah, I love how you mentioned that you were scared to get married, you know?
Yeah.
And I think it ties in what you were mentioning too, where it's like we kind of are in this place where we're like, oh, I'm already 40 or I'm at this age and I'm not married yet, blah, blah, blah. And we're not kind of owning powerfully that decision because it's a choice. But it was
Mm-hmm.
like, because you were scared, you know, maybe the decision was like, I'm not going to get married right now.
Yes.
But we can shift and then be like, hey, actually, maybe I am. So that do it scared in a sense, or
Yeah. So that this is, I think this is the beauty of walking with God is like, so suddenly my fear gets exposed, right? And now I have this opportunity. Do I want to talk to God about it? Or do I want to put this under the rug? Even though he knows it's real and I know it's real, it's not on the table yet. Right? You know, God's talking in Isaiah. He's like, man, they praise me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. You know, and so there is something about the resonance in the frequency between your heart and your mouth where you're saying the same thing, and suddenly it becomes a real powerful experience, you know. So when I start speaking to God about it, it's now not time for me to say, okay, well, I'm Joseph and I'm going to work on my fear and I'm going to work on this. No, in that moment, I was like, I give you full permission to father me through this. I can't do this. I'd rather you father me through it. You know, I believe every believer's life with their father was supposed to be like this, where when you come into things and you're like, man, that's hard, or wow, I saw this in my heart and I didn't realize it was there. It's not our time to now go, well, I better fix it. And what are 10 scriptures I'm going to use to try and fix this thing? It's actually as simple as, Father, I invite you in this journey. Can you father me through this? You know,
That's so good.
and and it's so easy. Jesus said, hey, you're burdened, you're heavy laden from all the law, from all the requirements that everyone wants to throw on you to try and be good enough. Come to me. I'll give you rest. I do have a yoke. My yoke is union. My yoke is easy. My burden is light. Come. You know, and most believers don't like I feel like a lot of believers live a sad life. Like they live they live in this place of it could be great and it's not. Do you know what I mean? And they look at unbelievers be like, well, this person is so free running around doing whatever they want. And I don't think that that's necessarily how God wanted it to be, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with that.
no, I love how you said like you can either put it under the rug or place it on the table. And could you kind of like break that down a little bit more? Because I think some believers, maybe even myself, will like kind of struggle with that. Maybe I will just sweep it under the rug and be like, instead of like putting it on the table. So can you expand on that?
Yeah, I grew up around church. So I grew up in India, Hyderabad, South India. I was taken to a Anglican old school church, like hundreds of years old, with a pipe organ, right? Altar boys, all of that kind of stuff. So I saw all of that as a child. I got taken to Sunday school. I learned all the stories, and I watched religion in its full form, right? I didn't hear people talking to me about how God spoke to them, how a miracle happened, how you can engage Holy Spirit, none of this stuff, right? It was just there is a God somewhere. You dress up like this. You go on a Sunday. You be a good person. He's happy with you. You're not a good person. He's not happy with you. So what happens in that kind of culture is you learn how to put a lot of things under the rug, right? Because it's not about union anymore. It's not about intimacy anymore. It's just about duty, right? It's just about do some works. So it's easy for us to go, well, I'll just put that under the rug. Because we how do I say this in a nice way? we uh, Intimacy and going deeper with God is something that we aren't sure of, and so we end up playing some games. I'll tell you what I mean. So when I came to God, I said to him, I'm not going to play any game. Like if I have a problem anywhere, we're talking about it, right? If you're really this good and you're really this real, then you have my life. I will submit. You got me. But I need to be able to just say anything, anytime, anyway. And I thought God may have a problem with that, but obviously God loves it like that more than anyone else. And so if you think about it this way, when my children, as they're growing up with me and they have a problem, and I know they have a problem, and maybe they know that I know they have a problem, and they put it under the rug, they don't want to talk to me about that, right? That hurts me, right? That hurts me not because I'm the great solver of all the problems and you should come to me to solve your problem. It hurts me because that's my kid. I love you. I feel your pain. And if I have a way to help you through that, it hurts even more. So I think that we have a culture that has embraced the do's and don'ts more than I'm actually just going to enjoy this journey with God, the good, the bad, the ugly, the mess. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that was actually mind blowing for me because
That's
yeah,
so good.
I have a 13-year-old son, and like I'm doing life with the blended family. We get along really well, and we communicate with each other because he's in both homes. And if there's something that he's going through, and his mom is updating me on this, it's like okay, like I know what happened during the week. So like we go on this weekly date, and I just keep the space open. Like I want him to open up and have the conversation. I'm not gonna bring it up to be like, hey, like what happened with this. My goal is to connect with him and to love on him. And then my hope is that he'll bring up and then we can kind of process together. So I've had to learn just to kind of like, instead of like, hey, like, let's talk about this thing that happened. I kind of just let him do it. And then when he does it, then it becomes this awesome kind of interaction where now he's processing and he's like, you know what, maybe I could have did this or this, that. And yeah, I love how you just brought that up because it was just like, oh, wow, it's very practical when we just take it up with the Lord. Like maybe the Lord's not like, it's on us to put it on the table or sweep it on the rug. And I think it was just very practical when you brought it up that way.
Yeah, like I had someone I was working with, and they love God, and they've been working with God for 2 decades, over 2 decades. And while we were coaching, something came up from them, right? Something not so good, not so happy. And I said, "Well, what did the Lord say when you brought that up to him?" And he was like, "Can I say that to the Lord?" You know, like, yeah, you're obviously disappointed in God. You feel like God let you down, like in so many significant moments in your life. Your heart has already said that to him 1,000 times. So the fact that your mouth now is not going to say what your heart's been screaming, right? God can't interfere here and perpetuate a relationship that you don't want to begin in honesty and in love and in truth, you know? So a lot of believers don't even know they can just tell the truth to God. So in my coaching, we end up a lot of times go to a point where people go, you know what? I don't trust God. And it's like, okay, great. You don't trust God. He already knows that. So why don't you trust God? Well, actually, when I was 15, my parents split up and nobody told me anything. And I was praying to God that my parents will come back together, and they never came back together. How did he let that happen? Valid question. This is a valid question. It's a real conversation. Now, will you have it with the Lord and walk it out? Or are you going to pretend like, try and skip the process and miss out on the outcome? The outcome of walking through hard conversations is deeper union, right? Any friendship, any relationship, when you walk through some kind of conflict or something that was a misunderstanding, or something that was hard, you end up closer together. And so the enemy's done a great job at stopping people through religion from having these kind of conversations with the Lord. When my mom passed, I had a 6-month time frame, roughly around 6 months, of why did you take her? Like I gave you everything. I'm doing my best not to hold back anything from you. Why would you take my mom? Like, that was really how I felt. Now, if I'm not going to tell him that, but my heart's going to say that, and I'm going to go about acting like everything's okay, I'm starting to create such a separation. And I know that deep down. You get what I mean? And so when you're able to tell the truth, be vulnerable, transparent, be real, even if it's messy, that's as tight and deep as it's going to get, So a lot of people, I think, feel a pressure to try and keep things pretty and not just tell the truth.
I love how you brought up too, like, Father, I'm inviting you to father me through this. Because I think that so many times it goes back to the performance thing, right? And I feel like one of the main ways that the enemy tries to keep believers stuck is, again, going back to that laws and rules and regulations and not relationship. And so I think when there is a difficult question, when there is something that we're like, God, I don't get this, what we want to turn to is, okay, I know how to fix this, and I know these scriptures, and I'm going to do this and this. But instead, turning to him and just saying, Father, father me through this. I don't understand why I'm walking through this right now. I don't understand why this happened. I have a lot of hurt in my heart over this. I don't trust you about this. I don't, whatever the case may be, father me through this. I just think that's such a beautiful picture because, just being transparent, like something that I have been wrestling with in my own heart recently is this idea of like, I know that you're a good father. And, that was a whole journey that God took me on of coming to know him as daddy, not just father. And then, as you go through life and you go through things, you're like, okay, I know you're a good father. And I know a good father wouldn't put his kids in this situation. That doesn't mean that his kids won't be in that situation though. And so I love this perspective of, Father, father me through this, because I know that I'm not in this alone. I know that we're going through it together. And while I don't understand and I don't necessarily have the context and I don't see the big picture, father me through this. What would you add to that?
I think everything that we go through in life as believers comes back to the simple question of my free will, and will I let him in? Religion has taught us your free will and then go and do the right things. But I think so. For example, there are guys I've worked with and maybe they struggle with prayer. They don't pray much, or they don't read their word, or they'd like to get deeper with God, but it just doesn't happen in their life. And they've tried to beat it into themselves by putting themselves on regimens. Like, I will read the Bible, 1 chapter, 5 chapters, whatever, 1 year Bible plan, and it doesn't happen. And then they feel even worse, right? And so that was where we began this conversation of, what if you ask him to father you into this, right? Do you know you can ask God to make you someone who prays more? You can ask God to make you the man that will read more, right? We don't realize how dependent we can be on him. The only thing that he's not taking from us is our free will, and so every situation that we face, whether it's something bad that's exposed or something hard that I go through on the outside, it all comes back to this one simple thing of, okay, well, now I see it, am I willing to let God in? And letting God in is, Father, I give you full permission. What I've found when I've done this is that nothing has been able to stop me in my life, right? Betrayal, backstabbing, things that have been said about me, open attempts to kind of squash me. Nothing can stop you now because you're giving your Father free reign. But this other thing I realized was, in all my relationships, when I would say, Father, I give you full permission, please father me through this, he would deal to my heart. Even though I can see this person's blatant issue or something they're doing that's totally wrong, he would do something in and through me that wouldn't matter anymore. And I started to learn that, man, everything is actually about me and you and me and you. And there's nothing that's beyond your ability to do something in me and beyond your ability to do something through me and for me also, you know? So I think that is a big one, right? Like, so let's say in situations like Christianity situations, someone may realize I have a problem with this person. Like for me, okay, my last 3-4 years, I've come face to face with a lot of my insecurities, a lot of my jealousy, right? That shows up when different things happen for people. But once I see that, it's as simple as, Father, I am willing for you to take this away. I am willing for you to father me through this and make me who I was always supposed to be. Because the original intent of us was not to have jealousy, was not to have insecurities, right? So I think that's a very big part for people to understand. Actually, it all comes back down to, Father, I give you full permission in the situation, you know.
I love that. That's really beautiful.
You know, I don't know if I'm articulating what I'm trying to say well, but I just want to say a couple more things here, right? Like my children have supreme faith in me, and I never had to sit them down to take them through a faith lesson. We did
Hmm.
not do 10 steps to faith. We did not do 12 steps to faith, 5 of the greatest enemies of faith. None of that. They have supreme faith. If something goes wrong in my house, they are running to find me. They're running to find mama or they're running to find papa. They didn't even have to be taught the subject. So, see, as believers, we've all learned about faith, and we now try to have faith in our faith. And we complicate this whole thing.
Truth.
You know, like I don't need faith in my faith. I need faith in him. When I am faithless, he is faithful.
Yeah.
So it was never supposed to be about, well, look at how much faith I got and what I do with my faith. No, I trust him.
Yeah.
I trust him. My faith is in him. And so that faith gets developed through intimacy, union, conversation, healthy engagement. And religion's done a good job to kind of ruin that part. Like my children, they learned faith from playing with my dreads, right? My youngest daughter, I'm going to cut my dreads this week. She doesn't want me to cut it. You know, she's only known me like this. So playing with my ears. Like these are things that, you know, like we don't understand. Like sitting with God is not always, I use a Bible and I meditated on chapter 6 and I got this revelation, open eye vision. You can sit under a tree, eat a mango, and enjoy him.
Yes.
Right?
Come on.
You
Yes.
know, so I think because of some of that religious stuff, we've not allowed the relationship to evolve, right? The faith to evolve, the journey to just grow and be natural. And so I want to throw that in there for listeners around marriage, right? The more you enjoy who God is in your life, this subject will open up to you in a new dimension. Yeah.
I love that.
So
Thank
much
you.
we can say about that.
Yeah. Thank you for tagging that in there. I really appreciated that.
It's a deep conversation.
It is. It's such a good conversation, though, and such an important one. Because these are, you know, I mean, we started talking about there's no weight, but now we're getting into the heart issues and what to do with those issues in the heart, what to do with that cognitive dissonance, what to do with I feel like it's a unicorn, or what to do with I'm scared, or I don't trust you, or I got hurt, or whatever. Like now we're getting into the meat of what you're talking about, because yes, it's about training. It's also about cultivating relationship. And Father, in every season of my life, I invite you in. Father me through this.
Yeah. You know, I want to just throw a practical thing in here too, just quickly, like,
Yeah.
because people or usually get hung up on what's the right thing to do. Should I be on a dating app? Should I not be on an app? Should I meet this person? Should I not be? How do you know when you can go on a date? And it can get very complicated when you're trying to find the right thing to do. And so I just want to say something, right? The Bible says many are the plans in a man's heart, but the Lord directs the steps. And this is where I think a lot of people are scared to plan, but God's not going to do the planning for you. The planning happens from your heart, but he does the directing of your steps. And that's where this beautiful union, you and him, the co-laboring, the doing life together happens. But what I've found is a lot of people are scared to make the plans, so they want God to make the plans. so they don't do anything. Or some people, they make the plans, but then they also direct their steps. And so they don't want God involved there, you know? It's like, God, before I do anything, you got 5 minutes. Say something. If you don't say something, it's all me till I either screw up or it's amazing, then I'll come back to you, you know?
Yeah.
And God's like, man, I want to be there the whole way. Why can't I be there the whole
Mm.
way, you know? So I say to people, go on your date. Why are you worried? Well, I'm not sure if this person, well, why aren't you sure? Well, I see some red flags. Great. So make the choice as a free person instead of tagging this onto God's problem, you know? Like sometimes we complicated this and we can get really confused. So I want to throw that in there just to simplify that. Go on that date and let God speak to you on the date as you enjoy the date. Or if it's horrible, ask God to bail you out. Great.
Yes. Yes.
Simple.
Okay. So yeah, in this time, like if singles are kind of in this place of waiting, the kind of thing that to prioritize is like, hey, actually, let's be proactive with it and we can train. Does the training look like everything that kind of you talked about in this conversation today? Like understanding the
Yeah.
why, the heart motive, figuring out like how to have relationships with people, have hard conversations with people. Um,
Have our
Yeah.
conversations with God.
yeah, yeah.
With God, yeah, and they actually not hard. You realize after a while they're not hard, you know.
Mm,
So sometimes people go, man, how can you be so raw and real with people? I'm like, well, I'm raw and real with the creator of the universe. No person's gonna freak me out now, right? I'm not worried about a person anymore. When you're standing in front of eyes that burn with fire, it's not your person. You're not worried about a person, and so I see now we can come into maybe what most people major on, but I think it's a minor, right? The practical training part is the minor part. That's the easier part. When the
mm,
heart and the intentions are not in alignment, doesn't matter how much you do the practical training part, you're always disappointed, you know? So we've talked about the heart, we talked about the intentions, we talked about the freedom. I still remember when I walked past Kirsten at church and I was like, wow, like I don't need to marry her. And if I never get married, I'm going to have an amazing life. And a year before that, I never thought I could have got to that position. See, I didn't think it was humanly possible to really believe I'm going to have an amazing life, marriage or no marriage. And now looking back, I can see how much God had to remove that out of my heart. Otherwise, I would have made this marriage fulfill me and I would have shaped it to become something I need instead of what it was created to be, you know? And so that freedom of going, man, like, I don't need marriage now. So finally, when we got married, I said to her, like, I don't need you. I want you. This is way more powerful. When I need you, it's not a choice anymore. I didn't
mm,
choose you anymore. I need you because you're fulfilling something that I think's lacking. But you're not fulfilling anything that's lacking in me. You are something I desire. You are someone I want. Right? It changes the whole game. You know, God doesn't need us. He wants us. He chooses us. There's so much power in that, you know. And so we talked about the freedom, we talked about the heart, and now the practical stuff, I think, is that everyone is looking for a man or a woman of a standard that they don't live up to, that they don't live in reality, right? Let's say, and everybody has their own chart, like a 10 out of 10 person, whatever your chart is. But if you have a chart and you're an 8 out of 10, like, or you want an 8 out of 10 person, you're gonna have to make sure you're an 8 out of 10 person yourself, right? And you need some friends who are gonna tell you the truth. You know, as much as
mm,
we like to say, well, looks shouldn't matter because we're believers and it's all about the heart, and we make up all the stuff. Actually, like beauty is beauty. It's not just what's on the outside. Even for men, right? Maybe you want to call it handsome, I don't know, but I'll still call it beauty. So I think men can be beautiful. I'm sure Mickler will agree with me. But beauty, it radiates out of the countenance of somebody, you know.
mm,
Purity, righteousness, holiness, freedom, it all radiates, and people can feel that whether they acknowledge it or not. And so if you're someone that now, after you understand heart motive, you understand freedom, where you're actually free. A lot of people are not free because they still think marriage is going to save them. But if you're like, you know what, I give God permission to father me into that freedom, then the practical stuff becomes your spirit, your soul, your body, your heart, your finances, your purpose. These are elements of your life you start engaging every day and enjoying every day, you know? And so, like, I like to talk about squeezing the juice out of life. Do you enjoy your life? Are you happy in your life? Like, Do you take time to enjoy the moments with people, with yourself, with God? Do you actually enjoy life? And a lot of people don't enjoy their life. So that would be my thing. Practically training yourself, your spirit, your soul, your body, different elements of you. You're starting to engage and starting to better yourself, if you want, for a lack of a better word. Right?
I love that. Level up.
Yeah. Level up. Yeah. Something happens to you when you take your body somewhere you never knew it could go. Something happens to you when you spend time in the spirit. Something happens to you when you let yourself hear from the Lord, right? The Bible says His words are like life to your bones, to your flesh. It's health to your bones. Like something happens, you rejuvenate, you change physiologically. Something happens, Something happens to your heart when you sit in the presence of love itself. Right? There is no love outside of God. So sitting in His presence and love, something happens to you. And so all these things are a big part of training and leveling up your life. And then purpose, taking time. So when Kirsten and I finally, I proposed to her, that was our first proper date. We were actually friends for a long time. But then obviously all of this happened and we weren't sure what was going to happen from there. And then we ended up getting married. But it was like, we talked about our future, and I knew her purpose, her calling to some extent, right? There were prophetic words that were spoken over her that I had heard. And I was like, yeah, I see that. And I see how that lines up with words that were spoken over me, right? So it wasn't like we're going to choose each other above what God has already spoken over your future. And you know what I'm saying? So I think that also your purpose matters, the path, the plan, the what God is doing in your life, the countries, the nations. I think some people, the guy that God has had for them, because I don't think it's only one person, but the guy or the girl was in a nation that they might have never traveled to, you know? Yeah, I mean, I can keep ranting on here, but
I'm like, man, we should just keep the rant going.
yeah, so I remember sitting in church one day and this guy was prophesying over Kirsten and he was like, I see you wearing, it looks like Asian clothing and you're on the back of a truck and you're handing out stuff to all these people in a village on the back of a truck and you're giving them food, but it's not just natural food, it's spiritual food and clothing, and I took that metaphorically. While I'm listening to that, I'm watching it and I suddenly see God show me that I'm driving that truck, right?
Wow.
I never told her this. In fact, I don't know if I ever told her this even now. But that was
Surprise!
that was a big part of me going, oh yeah, okay, like we've been aligned. Like this is not just some attraction or infatuation. Like there is more to this, So if I didn't have a glimpse, like we already knew I was going to travel. So now we get married, we have children, and the travel begins. My wife's not shocked. She's not like, well, how can you travel now? And that. No, we already because we understand purpose. We already prepped for it. So when you don't understand these things and then you're just waiting to get married, yeah, you get married and then what? If you try and make your marriage the purpose, that's how you suffocate the life out of it. So then what happens? Oh, I got to explore my purpose. It's a bit harder now because the freedom that you had to move around it's not the same after you get married. It's still possible, but I'm just saying that God's designed it in such a way that you already have a path, you have a plan, and then He brings a person along who also has a path and a plan, and somehow there's an interweaving. And He mapped it out. You don't have to map it out. He mapped it out. And so when the purpose starts to go to a next level, like from 2018, I started, I saw you, Mickler, I met you guys. I think I met Rachel the same time.
Yep.
I traveled overseas like 9 times in 2 years, right? Year and a half. That's a lot with kids and running a fitness business. God prepped me and my wife for that. Otherwise, we wouldn't have made it through that season, And so I keep saying this because as you just engage your path, enjoy your path, there is someone being prepared on their path to then intertwine with you,
That's good. That's so good. And I think that is important of like even how you were talking about like the purpose goes to the next level And you don't have to know exactly how it intertwines because God's already got that mapped out, right? You don't have to have the map. I think sometimes we can get hung up on that too, of like, well, I see this and I see this, but how does this go? And I think what you're saying, if I'm hearing you correctly, is like, if you're feeling that alignment in the spirit, like God's got it mapped out. You don't have to figure that out. He'll show you how that intertwines.
Yeah. And that, I think it's really good that you pick up on this so we can bring that in connection to relationships as well, right? Is that when I want to know the full picture, what I'm saying is, God, I don't really trust you. And there's nothing wrong in that, but say the truth, right? Tell the truth. Like, God, I actually don't trust you. That's why I want the whole picture right now. So then I can trust the picture a bit more than I need to trust you, right? But when it comes to relationships, there's another thing I think is everybody thinks they're going to get a finished product, right? They're going to get someone in their fullness. But in reality, husband and wife bring out the fullness in one another. So you're not supposed to get someone who's finished. If they were finished, they would be done. Right? You're going to get someone who has potential, who then gives you influence into their life to help bring that out while they're doing the same for you. You know, so as you get older, it gets a bit harder because you can see people and then you see their issues, right? And then you're like, well, there's too many issues here. And you can shut doors that maybe you're going to be part of that solution of some of those issues, you know, just like they're going to be in yours. You know, and so I think that's a big element of understanding that actually in marriage, you're both going to uncover and help each other mature as well. And you can't be like, what I think happens is the longer you wait, you get set in your ways, which is natural, right? You get set in your ways. So then you see people and it's almost like you can become, I can't be bothered walking through that with, you know, but you forget that actually they are also going to have to walk through my stuff with me. Like,
That's right.
this is going two-way here,
Yeah.
you know? Yeah. And so I've seen some people walk through and move away from someone just because they see some of their issues, but they were great people. You know, this was a great person that, you know, you get what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Totally. Oh, yeah, that totally makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. When we got married, God gave me this vivid picture of a yellow bud. It was like a rose bud. And he said to me, this is Kirsten. And whether this bud blossoms or not is now partially going to be your responsibility. And that was really heavy when he said that to me, because I was like, wow, like I have a part to play here. You know, that is, if you read Ephesians 5, it talks about husbands and wives, how to interact. And it's actually both of them are helping one another blossom. You know, and it talks about a husband washing her with the water of the word, right? Like you're watering her with this and she's going to blossom, you know? And these are parts of marriage people, I think, don't talk about enough. And so then after they get married 3 years later, it becomes a conversation. You know? Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. That's so good and so important. And like you were saying, it's something that doesn't get talked enough about. So thank you for bringing it up.
Yeah. That's a good convo. We could keep going here, but
I know.
Yeah.
No, I
You're
mean,
calm, Mickler.
I'm down. Like, so with that, Joseph, like, do we put too much pressure on this kind of, I don't know, concept or idea of like, yeah, I need, like, I'm gonna get married in a sense. Like, hold on, sorry, I had it like.
Okay, wait. Before you go there, let me say this, right? I used to think that there's only one perfect person for everyone. You know, people like you kind of it gets said, yeah, the one, but like the one is like the only one, like you know. And so then, if that was the truth, then one guy getting married the wrong way ruins it for everybody. Like it's one person, you know. So this concept of the one is actually less about who is the one for me and who am I willing to be the one for.
Oh, I love that.
And this is where I think we miss it, because I could be the one for an ex-prostitute who now has relationship issues, trust issues, but I see something in her, I love her, and now I'm willing to do life with her, and I'll walk out this journey, whatever it's going to be. Like me being the one for someone is I'm willing to be the one for this drug dealer guy who might have violent tendencies, and now things are going to happen, but I've chosen to be the one for him. I'm not trying to make him the one for me. And I think just that mindset changes the whole concept of a relationship, where now you're no longer running around looking for perfection. You're willing to explore and engage with any person, and then you're choosing, you know what? You're worth it to me. I see the good, I see some bad. There's probably some more ugly that I may find out later, but I am willing. I am willing to walk through this with you, right? That's what a wedding a vow is. A wedding vow is hey, sickness and in health, right? Poor or rich, whatever happens. I'm making a public commitment right now of who I am going to be. I will be the one for you, not you need to be the one for me. Otherwise, the vows would be like, well, okay, well, I need you to be this, 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 this. Do
Truth.
you? All right. You know?
Yeah, no, I love that. I want to bring it back to something you said a minute ago because I think that's really really important in terms of who am I willing to be the one for? This concept of alignment and alignment of purpose and spiritual alignment. Will you talk to that for a minute? Because I think that, again, I know this is something that I'm super passionate about is that I'm not only marrying, and I know Mickler feels the same way too. Like, I am not pursuing marriage just to fix the problem of loneliness, right? I
Yep.
am pursuing marriage to build a legacy and to build a kingdom legacy. And for us to advance the purposes that God has for us together and champion each
Mm-hmm.
other on in who God uniquely made each of us to be. And so I think that, in the midst of all of like the boxes checked or whatever, like you were saying, like, oh, well, this person could be the one. Like, no, who am I willing to be the one for? For me, there's a lot of weight that I put on that spiritual alignment and that alignment of purpose. Right. So what would you say to that and how to kind of navigate that?
Yeah, so when I become a person who's on my path and my purpose, then automatically the person I engage, I consider their path and their purpose, right? If I know that for me, she is not the beginning and the end, but she's a partner on my journey, then I also automatically understand I'm a partner on her journey,
Yeah.
right? And so it actually makes the relationship really healthy because then I'm doing whatever I can to facilitate her path also, while she's doing whatever she can to facilitate my path also. And at the same time, I am not forcing her to be anything, to go anywhere, do anything that she's not willing to walk into. That was not my job, right? When I married her in front of everybody, I didn't say, I love you when you do this, if you do that, and we'll
Mm.
change how much if you do this. There was none of that in my vows, right? And so we forget this really quickly. So, like, it's not my job to make, like, let's say we talk about, you're saying, I pursue marriage so that husband and wife, we can pursue the things of God. But the depth and the level to which your husband in the future is going to want that, you don't know what that will be, you know?
Yeah.
Like I didn't know what Kirsten's depth would be, how much she'd want. And it wasn't my job to make her want stuff like I want it. And I think
Mm.
that's where the understanding of you have a purpose, I have a purpose. I'm choosing to be the one for you and love you because that's what I'm called to do. I'm called to love you and lay my life down for you, not if you do this or when you do this, irrespective.
Yeah.
But what I've seen is that the love causes that person to flourish in such a way that they end up doing all those things.
Mm.
And so we've kind of got around the wrong way. Like even the word submission, submission was always supposed to be the fruit on a tree. It was supposed to be the byproduct of overwhelming love. Where there
Yeah.
is overwhelming love, you will find easy submission. And this is
Mm.
in leadership, this is in marriage, anywhere you go, where there is a leader and he has overwhelming love for people, the people submit without even realizing. Right? Even you or me, when we feel love from somebody, that real love, free love, then we automatically choose to submit. We want to know their opinion. We let them speak into our lives. We let them tell us things. So like that, even in marriage, right? Submission was just supposed to be a byproduct of an exchange of overwhelming love, not something
Mm.
you demand. And so if we come back to what we're talking about here of she has a purpose, I have a purpose, we acknowledge that in one another, but I also understand my job is just to love you for who you are, not love you to make you who I think you should be. That just allows the relationship to really blossom even more.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah.
I have so much. I'm like, yo. Oh man. Okay, so like I have the understanding, like, okay, if I want to put myself out there and I'm looking
Yeah,
for this 10 or whatever, I should be a 10 too. So that's why I'm like choosing to train, right?
sure.
And then this relationship now is like it's a based off of choice. Like we're gonna step into this off of choice. what if we get to the point where like, hey, I'm choosing this person, but then now it's not mutual anymore. Like the other person is not choosing you. Because I know we had talked about this before, where it was like, I could have got married, if
Yeah.
and becoming that one for that person. It could have been for it with that prostitute. It could have been with that drug dealer or whatever, because I'm choosing that. But what if it's like the other person is not, down?
You
Then
show up at their house at 1 a.m. with a gun and force them to marry you. That's what you do. Like, well, what are you gonna do? This is part of the journey, you know. And I'm joking, by the way, in case someone takes a clip. But like, so see, here's the thing that I'm big on. Like, let's say people are dating. I'm like, date first, hang out as much as possible, and do lots of it with other people around, because you're gonna see something in that person that you won't see if it's just one and one, right? Like, I learned a lot about who Kirsten was in a lecture theater with a bunch of other people, and I saw amazing things that I thought were amazing about her, and she had no idea I was looking, you know. So sometimes we forget about that dynamic. Like, when you get married, you're not just going to be you and your spouse together alone forever. You're going to be in multiple situations with other people, and you're going to start to see things in them that you could have seen before you get married, you know? So I like to explore, and I like to tell people to explore. So if there's person A and person B, they're wanting to get to know each other, please make sure you meet in public, make sure you meet in groups, make sure you meet alone, right? Control yourself, learn how to control yourself, whatever. But you got to do all spectrum so you get a better picture. And the second thing I would say is, don't jump the gun in your heart where you start to dream and you start to act like you're somewhere where you're not. And I've seen a lot of guys do that, you know, guys who have held themselves, guys who've been like, now I'm going to wait for the right one, or things like that. But then when they start, like, they go on one date or something, and it's like already dreaming of the wedding day. And so your heart's gone somewhere, you know, your heart's already gone somewhere. And it's not her fault, because she didn't take you there. You went there on your own, and now you get a reality check and you kind of backtrack a little bit. And that's part of maturing. That's part of growing up, where you go, man, I think I went where she wasn't going, you know? And so you start to learn in a relationship to go and gauge the other person also. Right. And I think communication is a big deal there, you know?
No, I love how you brought that up, because I felt like I was in a culture where like the one-on-one time wasn't allowed. You can't be one-on-one with the opposite sex, because we don't have self-control, and blah blah blah. So because of that, I became bitter on the idea of like, oh, if I'm pursuing this woman, it's gonna be like in front of everyone else, like group dating. I know like churches, they like do group text. Like, you can't text them individually. You have to have like
What? That's
yeah.
a thing?
I was like, yo, what is going on?
Good grief. Anyway,
But I guess in that
It's another
idea,
podcast of its own.
yeah,
for real. Oh, my
real.
word. Never
But
heard about that. Anyway.
yeah, I became bitter with that idea. Like, I'm not going to. If I'm dating this girl now, it's one-on-one, because like, forget that whole thing. But you're saying you learn so much more about this other person in the context of like how she's interacting with other people, and you are observing her, or this, or the guy or whatever, and certain aspects of her character, the things that she values, start to kind of show in a different light when you are doing this with other people, from my understanding, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think it's this or that. I think it's it's the whole picture, you
Mm,
know?
mm-hmm.
And I
And
think,
yeah,
go
go.
ahead. No, you go.
No, I was just gonna say, because your real relationship after you get married includes all these scenarios anyway.
Yeah.
So I was just going to add the piece to that, because in 2023, a lot of dating is long distance and a lot of it is online and all of that kind of stuff too. I think that there are ways that you can also observe the same way of how they interact in a group, even in that setting, right? Whether it's an online community, how they interact with their friends, how they interact with their family. I think that everything that you're saying is true. And I just want to kind of tag that on just because that's a reality of a lot of dating in 2023. And so keeping in mind that you are still observing how this person interacts. It's kind of like for me, like if I go to dinner with a guy, I watch how he treats the server, right? I watch how he treats the other people in the restaurant, in the parking lot, all of these kind of things, like my antenna are up. And I think that you can do the same thing whether you're in person or online. I mean, obviously, the three of us met through an online community. So I think that there are ways that you can still be observing that, even if you're not necessarily, if you don't necessarily have the luxury all the time of being around them in every circumstance in person.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. It's interesting, right? The culture of don't meet alone. It's just the root is so much fear, and the fear is you're going to do something wrong.
Yep.
And in reality, like God is bigger than your mistake. I'm not encouraging mistakes, but I'm like, God is bigger than your biggest fear and your biggest mistake.
Yeah.
So I cannot drive all my actions from the root being fear of something going wrong, I think a lot of that kind of purity culture messed up a lot of sexual lives of marriages,
Truth.
but people didn't know how to enjoy their spouse now. It's like, so these are conversations that I think you guys should have too, which is good.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we will. That'll be a whole different episode. We touched on it a little bit, but yeah. Because it's important. It's important to talk about because to your point, Joseph, like it has had more of an impact than people acknowledge, I think.
Yep.
Both inside and outside of marriage.
Yeah. I'll just say the last couple of things, then I got to jump off, right? This has been awesome. I'll be keen to do it again if you want to. Very happy you guys are doing this, so that's great. But I just want to say I listened to a podcast, a little bit of it this afternoon, and they were just talking about sleeping around. They're talking about, having sex on planes. This conversation is happening in the world, whether we like it or not. It's already there. And there's 13-year-olds, 15-year-olds, 10-year-olds now getting pulled into this conversation, whether you and I like it or not. So it's either we're going to bring light into this or not. That's really it. Like, because it's happening anyway. So there are people now talking about body counts and talking about how do you decide who's a good wife and a good husband. And they're all throwing lots of rubbish into this conversation. And I believe that many people are called to start bringing the light into that conversation too, and bringing it from the heart perspective, not from the action, do or don't perspective. So what I mean by that is when I'm observing this woman who might be potentially my wife, I'm not observing her to see if she matches my checklist and gets an A+ on my report card so she can earn me, right? I'm observing who she is in her fullness so I can make a decision in my heart that I will lay my life down for her no matter what. So I'm not only looking for the good, I'm looking for everything because I'm accepting it all, right? So right now, a lot of the conversation in the world stops at the part of, are you good enough for me? And we're going to have to go deeper than that for a healthy society, healthy community, because we weren't designed to be people that just watched each other's behaviors, right? We were designed for love. Love accepts the full picture. And so the world's conversation is kind of halfway now. We have to jump in there to take it all the way,
So good. Yeah.
Man, this whole conversation was super fire.
I'm going to go back and listen and digest to a lot of this. It's so good.
Most definitely.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah.
Thank you,
fun.
Joseph.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we really appreciate you joining us and sharing your wisdom.
So if people wanted to connect with you, Joseph, you want to let them know how, or I can drop it in the description and all that good stuff for you.
Yeah, I mean, if people want to connect with you in 2023, they find you. They'll find me. There's my name, Joseph Wilson. You find me. We're good.
Oh yeah, like Joseph Wilson's not a easily Google search name.
They'll find me. Yeah. Awesome.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys. Bless you, and I'll talk to you guys soon.
All right.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.
So yeah, this was I just feel like this has been really rich and I want to go back and listen myself and digest. I don't take it lightly when we get to learn from somebody who's gone before. And that just kept coming up for me over and over when Joseph was talking about, and I knew his wisdom as a married man. I also appreciated him bringing his, this is what it was like when I was single, conversation into it, because I think that that's so important as well. Um, so yeah, so if you found value in this conversation, which I'm sure you did, please take a moment and share it with somebody else who would benefit from what we talked about tonight. It would mean the world to all three of us if you would do that. And be sure to subscribe, hit that like button. And yeah, what else would you add, Mickler?
Most definitely. And I think a lot of the topics too that were brought up, we've talked about some of this, like the check boxes, having the standard and stuff. So like you can look through some of these old podcasts that we have, because we talk about it in more detail and more depth. So definitely check those out as well. So until the next one, y'all.